Welcome everybody. Thank you, Karen Pollard, for being here. Dr. Karen Pollard is her real title. We'll leave out the Rotary title of incoming district governor or district governor elect. She's a clinical neuropsychologist with extensive experience supporting military vets and individuals facing significant cognitive and emotional challenges. She's the founder of Brian Power Advisors and Brian Power Solutions, where she helps people understand their unique brain functioning to reduce stress, build resilience, and thrive in demanding environments. Karen joined Rotary in 2018 and now serves as the district governor-elect for Rotary District 7690 in central North Carolina. She helped to spearhead an approved global grant providing clean water access in Bluefields, Jamaica. Give her a round of applause wherever you are. Everybody knows Bluefields needs the water, especially now, and remains deeply committed to strengthening community wellness locally and internationally. Karen lives in Summerfield, North Carolina, with her husband, Kevin, and their blended family of 4 daughters. Give her a big Rotary welcome. Thank you, Rotarian District Governor-elect, wonderful person, Karen. Tell us how we're going to get through the crosses, Jamaica calls it crosses, of Melissa. Over to you.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you to your whole club for inviting me to speak today. I know that there's so much need right now, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to help. I want to give you a little bit of background about how I got connected to this project, and Allison gave you, or this talk, and Allison gave you a little bit of background on that because I was involved in spearheading a global grant in Bluefields. I'm going to share some pictures throughout that I took while I was there in April when we were installing some water catchment systems. The big picture up there is me with some of my friends from the Savlamar Club, who is our host club for that global grant. And I, made a lot of really good friends when I came here. And so when Hurricane Melissa came through, I have felt a lot emotionally myself, just because of my friends out in Western Jamaica, and meeting so many of the people there, and just wanting to, I don't know, I felt very emotionally connected, and feeling a lot like I am limited in what I can do to help because I'm so far away. I do have mental health experience. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I've been doing counseling with people who've been dealing with crisis and trauma since 2007 was when I started. So coming up on 20 years of that. And so if anything we talk about today can help somebody, I will feel very grateful that I had this opportunity to be with you. And I know Allison said you all were going to turn off your cameras and mute yourself, but I would I would love some interaction as I go through this presentation, because I am not there. I am not on the ground. I'm not experiencing everything that you all are experiencing. And so I think it's important to get that perspective as we move through this. But I will talk about a few things.
Quick thing, Karen. Sometimes because of the bandwidth with the internet, while we do that, because we don't want to lose anybody, and we certainly don't want to lose you. So we try not to overwhelm the system by everybody's camera being on and so on. So we would encourage people to write anything in the chat, and Prezi, you could kind of see how you can communicate that to her since she wants that interaction. I don't know if that is okay.
Oh yeah, that'll work fine. Or just unmuting like you just did would be okay.
Yeah.
Or,
yes.
And without turning the cameras on, that's fine. I just want people to feel like they can chime in, because I think folks might get more out of it if we can have some participation. So the first thing is, when we talk about mental health, what do we mean? Does anyone want to chime in? When we say mental health, what does that mean to you? And I can't see the chat the way my computer is. So if anyone puts something in the chat, if somebody can be my liaison, I'd appreciate it.
Well, for me, since everybody's shy, mental health, I always look at the brain as a body part that we can't touch, but controls a lot. So making sure that that part of my body that controls so much is well, similar to the rest of myself. That's what I think of mental health, that organ, or, I don't know what you medically call it, making sure it is as fit as me going to the gym with my body parts, my other body parts. Sorry.
Yeah, and importantly, so she basically is talking about the psychological, I suppose that's running from the brain, but even more importantly, we can't forget our emotional well-being and our social well-being, because I think all of them work in tandem in terms of how we would think about what's happening to us at any moment in time, and our ability to handle it in a manner that, is balanced, stable, and those kinds of words. That there is that when we face difficult challenges, we have a certain amount of resilience to be able to cope without spiraling and, forever into something that you can't come back from. So when you have that kind of stable, balanced outlook where you're psychologically, emotionally, and socially balanced, then I suppose you can muddle along in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are both really great answers and really speak to the breadth and depth of what we mean when we say mental health. We talk about how we feel and how that impacts everything else, as you said, Allison. And I think a couple of things that are important to point out about mental health is it can be conscious or unconscious. Sometimes we know exactly how we're feeling, what emotions we're experiencing, and sometimes it's a little more subtle than that, where things are impacting us and we're not exactly aware of what's impacting us and how it's weighing on us. And I think that's particularly relevant when there's a long time crisis that we're going through, such as the recovery from Hurricane Melissa. This is not something that happened one day and now we're dealing with it. This is something that's ongoing for a lot of people. And so sometimes the unconscious impact on our mental health is something that we don't really think about, but it's there. So I wanted to bring that up and also talk about that it's not static. Mental health can change. And as you were saying, Novelette, as you get more strategies for how to anticipate and become resilient, you can feel like your mental health is in a better place or not so good place, depending on what's going on. So I kind of wanted to introduce those concepts. And a lot of people wonder sometimes, or I've heard the comment, why are we focusing on mental health, particularly when there are so many other things going on? There are still communities where people need water and they need food and they need shelter. And isn't mental health something that should be addressed down the road? And I think that there's a case to be made for that. You need to be able to eat and have water and have shelter before you can spend a lot of time thinking about mental health, but you want to think about mental health at some point early on. And the reason for that is that long-term effects of trauma or crisis often occur because we avoid thinking about it. So when Allison mentioned, I work a lot with military veterans, and a lot of times what happens with military veterans is they're in a very traumatic situation, and the natural instinct is to not want to think about it, not want to do anything that reminds them of that situation, not want to be in any places that remind them of situations or hear any noises or smell any smells. So they avoid everything in their life that might trigger them. And that is a very natural instinct to have when you've gone through some kind of trauma. However, what the research tells us is that the avoidance of dealing with and confronting the trauma is actually what makes the anxiety and the long-term impact worse. So when you go through something really, really stressful, it's important to be aware that confronting it earlier is going to help prevent long-term psychological damage. So that's one reason that we're going ahead and talking about it now, even though some people are still dealing with really basic needs that they have to still meet. The other thing is kind of what Novelette and Allison were talking about, is that as we discuss this, we are creating healthy habits and healthy strategies that we can not only put in place for ourselves, but we can model for other people to help more people have the kind of structure that they need within their mental health in order to build resilience, which I understand is a big part of the Jamaican culture, it being resilient. And in order to be there, there's some skills that you want to have in place. So there are some unique considerations when you're thinking about trauma that or crisis that are a little bit different than other mental health considerations you would make just on an everyday basis. Some of these, thinking about what's normal. I hear that a lot. Is it normal that I am feeling really down? Is it normal that I can't sleep because I'm worried about this? Is it normal, whatever your reaction is? People often want to know, is it normal? And can I ignore it? I kind of already addressed, can I ignore it before? It's not a good idea to ignore it, because that's actually going to fuel a longer term impact. Does my situation warrant me feeling this way? In other words, I wasn't in the worst affected part of the country. Am I still allowed to feel depressed or stressed or upset by what's going on? And then how is it different if the crisis is ongoing, which again, I touched on. So the first three questions, especially, what's normal and does my situation warrant this? The answer is whatever you are experiencing is normal. There is no prescribed way that people should or should not react in response to a crisis or trauma. Sometimes people get into a pickle if they feel like, I should be over this by now. Again, especially if you're not in one of the areas where you're still dealing with the ongoing crisis, you think, okay, this has been 6 weeks. Why am I not over it? There's no timeline when you're dealing with something really stressful, and you're feeling for the people who might be there, or maybe you have family or friends that are in the affected area. And so that, remember when I talked about the mental health being unconscious, there could be times when you're unconsciously really feeling the weight of that stress. So it's always warranted, whatever you're feeling, and it's always normal. Don't let yourself fall into that trap of feeling like you are responding in a way that's abnormal or not okay.
So Karen, yeah, just jumping in there,
Yeah.
part of the dilemma for many people is how others may respond to what I am feeling. So I'm questioning myself about whether what I'm feeling is warranted because of the situation. And as you were saying, oh, shouldn't I get over it? It's because sometimes we are externalizing and looking at other people who, quote unquote, seem to be normal and have gotten over it. So if you could just tweak that idea that I'm just putting out there a little, how the community or those around you can make you question yourself even more about whether you are coping or, or you should have gotten over it already or so on.
Oh, absolutely. What a good point. It's human nature to look to others for feedback, to know if you're doing the right thing or feeling the right way. I mean, it's evolutionary that we do that. The problem is, in cases like this, not everybody out there is a mental health expert, and not everybody out there is confronting the difficult emotions that they're experiencing or has experienced, we all experience it differently. Like I said, what's normal? Some people might have very little reaction to this from an emotional standpoint. That's their normal, and that's okay for them. That we are not here to judge what's normal and what's not. And it can be very challenging when you're getting feedback from other people that, hey, you don't have the worst of it. You're not worthy of feeling, really depressed about it. But the truth is, they're not in your shoes, and they don't know what you're going through underneath or what connections you might have. And so I really want to drive home the point that if you are feeling something, some kind of reaction, it's normal and it's warranted and it's okay. And allow yourself to feel that. And if other people come at you, you're going to have to just try to be strong in your own convictions that it's okay for you to be feeling whatever you're feeling. This is kind of a lot of what I was saying already. There's no right way to process emotions. Bernadette, you had a comment? You're on mute. I don't know if you're trying to talk to the group.
Unmute, Bernie. Bernie, if you're hearing us, can you unmute? Because we see your hand up, but we're not hearing you.
Sorry, I was trying and it wasn't coming off. Right. So the question I wanted to ask Karen was, you said there's no timeline around, how long someone takes to be processing whatever reaction they're having, but at what point does it become unhealthy? At what point is it that someone needs help? Because whether it's Melissa or other issues that people face, time, it takes such a toll on you that sometimes you need, whether it's professional help or some other kind of support. At what point do we say, this person needs help?
That's a fantastic question. If it's okay with you, can we put a pin in that? Because I have a slide on it a little ways down the road. But I'm really glad you brought that up because you're absolutely right. There are times when this is more than just I'm having a reaction. Maybe somebody really does need professional help, and I want to help you all to understand what that point is. So I will address that, and feel free to ask follow-up questions.
Thank you.
If I don't do a good job of covering that later.
No problem. Thank you.
Sure. So what can you do in the meantime to help cope? Now, a lot of these are probably really obvious, so I'm going to ask the group, what can you do to cope with mental health?
Well, I guess one approach is, of course, acknowledging that there are challenges, that people may have challenges. So one of the and I'm sure everybody can relate to this, that one of the challenges that we have in Jamaica, and there is the generation, so people of my generation and before, speaking about mental health issues speaking is difficult. It's difficult for the individual, and it's also difficult for people to speak about mental health issues within their family, especially their children. So acknowledging it, accepting it as something that, as a health issue, which what Alison referred to earlier, and not something, particularly negative about an individual is probably what I find is one of the more useful things to do, first of all, and then it frees you to have a conversation around it at the very least. So, and this goes to the individual as well, that they accept that they have. So Jamaican men, of course, I guess like many men, refuse to go to the doctor, even generally, much, more so even for mental health. To accept or acknowledge that as an individual, a particular older individual, I have a mental health problem or mental health issue or mental health challenge is a major hurdle for many individuals. So acknowledging it, supporting it without judgment, I believe, is one of the big things.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I have a few that I'm listing in a moment, and you'll see one of them that I think is what you were saying is we often hear the phrase, treat others as you would be treated. But I think the opposite is true for mental health. Treat yourself as you would treat others. The grace that you would show to somebody else who came to you and said, I'm really struggling with this, is the grace that is needed for you to show yourself that it's okay to be struggling and to admit that. And I know that that can be very challenging a lot of the time. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Richard. Navla, something?
Yeah, you you talk about treating others as you would treat yourself, but what if we're not in the habit of having that kind of self-care, where we are gentle with ourselves, we are loving with ourselves, we can be vulnerable, and all the things, around how we take care of ourselves physically. Sometimes we're very good at that, but emotionally, we don't have the know-how about treating ourselves as part of our self-care package, treating ourselves well. So it becomes very difficult to actually give it to somebody else, because we engage in a lot of negativity about ourselves and our situations, even if we don't vocalize it to others. That negative thing that goes on in your head that, make you see yourself in a negative light. So then when you find yourself within a trauma situation or a really distressing situation, how all of that come together to create an even bigger barrier, where acknowledgement is concerned, where you go into denial, not admitting that something is wrong, where you probably might project it on everything else. So, yeah.
I think that you're spot on, that if you're not giving that grace to yourself and not taking care of yourself in that way, it's hard to give it to others. And I think that some of the things you can try in order to improve, if that's not something you're used to doing, that's not a pattern you're used to having with yourself, is to try to catch yourself when you're having that negative self-talk. I think the word should is or should or shouldn't is a very dangerous word, because it makes us feel like we should be a certain way or we shouldn't be a certain way, where in reality, that's not usually the case. So for me, I use that word as a cue to myself. If I hear my internal voice saying, you should be over this, you shouldn't be feeling this way, I try to hear that word and catch myself and remind myself that no, that's not correct, that it's okay to feel, and I have to override that. And when you're trying to change those types of patterns, it takes a long time. It's not something that you can do once or twice. It's a real effort at first to catch yourself with the negative self-talk and then try to reframe those thoughts. So give yourself grace. It'll take some time to be as forgiving to yourself as you probably need to be. I see another hand up. I can't hear you though. There we go.
You hearing me now?
Yes.
Yes, I'm good. Good afternoon, everybody. All right, so I think another strategy that probably we can employ to really cope with our mental health. I know of a term called the Tompkins model of grief, whereby at the first onset of the grief, or things you have lost, or it takes up your time, it takes up your day, it takes up your entire being. So it's like you're locked away, and so it's as if you cannot concentrate on anything else. But what the model suggests is that we gradually do things that gets us back into the routine of our day, so that we can progressively move forward. It's not going to go away overnight, but get into the rhythm of the day that you used to be in, before the trauma, before the grief, before whatever happened. And so engage yourself in family moments, engage yourself in for some persons who are believers in Christ, in prayer, and speaking to somebody to kind of vent. Also try to find somebody to speak to get what is inside of you out, so that you will begin to bloom again. It's not going to happen immediately, But when you begin to get back into the routine of the day, then what happens is that you now begin to grow around the grief because it is not going to go away. The loss is not going to go away. The feeling is not going to go away immediately, but you now begin to grow around it. And something that used to consume you now is beginning to get less and less in terms of its negative effect on you. So, you just find yourself doing things that you used to do before whatever happened. And so you gradually just grow around the trauma that you experience. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I really like the way you're saying grow around it. It reminds me of lots of times people feel like they're supposed to get over something, where I don't know that when you've gone through something really traumatic or a big crisis, sometimes saying get over it eventually doesn't make a lot of sense because it's now a part of you. It's something that you've been through that's a part of what's making you who you are. So I think what you're saying, growing around it or moving forward with it is a better way to think about it. And so that I really appreciate your comments and taking small steps to get back to routine when you have those opportunities. And that's of course easier when you're not still in the crisis. But that's important. Jim?
Thank you very much. Are you hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, my comment, I'm Jem Davis. I can't relate to general mental health. I'm a general mental health issue with myself. Perhaps I've gone through bouts of it and being unaware and not being able to put a name to it. But I can say that in the situation in which we find ourselves, when the hurricane struck, and I started seeing the pictures and the videos, I have little headaches. A tear falls here and there, and I'm becoming unsettled. I realize that, my response is abnormal. What can I do about it? I found firstly sharing my feelings with friends. I can't imagine why I'm feeling this way. But then I've realized that mainly it was because I felt helpless. I felt I could do nothing about solving the problem. But the moment I sat down and thought about what can I do, I can't rebuild a house, I can't so on. And I got involved by contributions, financial, or I found myself going to a wholesale place and buying up all sorts of things to give towards a group that is collecting. I started feeling better. So I found that my quote unquote mental health problem was because I felt the situation was so terrible. So many hundreds of thousands of Jamaicans are in this situation. And I, Jem Davis, sitting here looking at my own, enjoying my own comfort level, and I can do nothing about it. But the moment I found an opportunity to start to make a contribution, I found ease. So it may not work for everyone, but I found that my ability to address a situation that was bothering me made a significant contribution to how I felt. Thanks.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to in a more broad sense is understanding what you can control and what you can't control. And the things that you can control, focusing on those instead of the things you can't control that feel overwhelming. I think that's really smart. Some other things that haven't been said, if you're really in the midst of some serious overwhelming emotions, just breathing slowly and deeply can take the edge off a little bit to help you move to the next step. Make sure that you're resting and eating and caring for your body, because when we get emotionally overwhelmed, it's easy to let those things slide. Doing something for fun, which is sometimes really hard, and that's why I put the Ludo board on this page. That was something I enjoyed a lot when I was in Jamaica. And it can be really hard to force yourself to do something fun if you're in the middle of a crisis or feeling. I remember I can't remember how many days it was after Melissa, but I had just started receiving some videos from my friends of the devastation. I was feeling awful. And like Jem said, feeling very far away and not knowing what I could do. And I happened to have a dinner scheduled with some friends, and I looked at my plate and I started crying. I said, how can I eat? my friends have nothing right now. They have nothing, and so many people out there have nothing, and how can I do this? But it was, me not eating is not going to help the people there, and I need to take care of myself in order to do what I can from afar. And so remembering to allow yourself, it's okay to laugh, it's okay to have fun when you have those opportunities. Journaling, if sometimes some people have said that it's very difficult sometimes to talk openly about these types of emotions. And sometimes culturally it's difficult to talk about mental health. So putting it on paper can help with a release, even if you cannot speak with another person. And of course, as many of you have said, asking for help, talking to others, understanding that you're not alone can be very helpful. So I want to give you some do's and don'ts about how to help others, just because we're not all psychologists. And I want to give just a little bit framework if you're with somebody who's having a really hard time. So you do listen more than you talk, hear what they're going through and validate, oh my gosh, that sounds awful, what you're going through. I can't imagine, or I can imagine, and what statements that allow people to feel what it is that they're feeling, being present with them. It's natural to want to try to fix things or offer a solution or help them feel better, but in some cases, it's not time for that yet. It's time to just let them feel what they're feeling and just be present just sit with them in their emotion, whatever it is. Try to avoid saying at least. And what I mean by that is, at least you still have walls on your house. I know your roof is gone, but at least you still have walls. While those kinds of statements normally come from a good place of wanting to help people, remind them that there are things that they have to be grateful for, and it could be so much worse. It can also make the person who's sharing feel like they're not allowed to have the feelings that they're having. For those of you in Kingston who were talking earlier before the meeting about, well, we didn't get it as bad. It would not be helpful for somebody to say, well, at least you didn't get it as bad as Western Jamaica. You already know that. You're still having your emotions, and that's still okay. So try to avoid that. In the same line, avoiding forcing positivity. Sometimes people need to feel bad before they can feel better. So even though it comes from a good place, a lot of times to try to say, well, cheer up, don't cry. Sometimes that is not helpful and can even be hurtful for the emotional experience. And then comparing pains or situations is often not helpful for the reasons that we already said. There's really no way to compare two people's situation or the pain that they're going through. And so to try to do that, I think just puts the person who's sharing in a place where they don't feel like they're able to really share what they're experiencing or feel what they're experiencing. Navalette, I saw you unmuted.
Yes.
Did you have a comment?
Yes. Social media. They in this very hurricane situation, there are some of the survivors. I became aware of a particular case. Was told to me a lady was saying she didn't need any more food at the point in time that she was at. What she needed would have been like sanitary wear, just getting a bath, and social media pounded her as ungrateful and really, really tore into her. So this within the whole context of what we're doing, we also have to remember that people are sometimes a little bit more willing to share on social media, but we know what a place the internet is. So kind of help people also who, because we're gonna post this up later anyway. How do we respect when people say, in this situation at this point in time, this is what I need? If you could help with that.
Well, I think you already said it. It's not helpful to come at somebody and say, no, that's not what you need, or leave this space for somebody who needs it more. Again, we're getting into comparisons of pain and needs and situations. It's not helpful. So, I mean, I think that as people are listening to somebody's situation and what they need, it's important to remember the do's, hear what's going on with them and validate what they are experiencing and be present with them in that and help them with their needs if you can. And if you're a person who disagrees that somebody needs something, you can do that in silence. You don't need to post that publicly. You can just support somebody else's needs if you feel personally that they're more valid for whatever reason. I think that that social media can be so dangerous because of exactly what you brought up. So I'm glad that you broached that. So this is getting into the comments that were brought up earlier, when to seek professional help. So either for yourself or if you're talking to somebody else, when is it more than we're just coping with this amongst friends and family? When people start to feel hopeless, like there's no way this is going to get any better, or they start talking about harming themselves, or sometimes people won't say it that directly. They'll say things like, I think I'm just going to give up. And I want to say, when somebody says that, if you are ever on the receiving end of that and somebody says to you, I think I'm going to give up, the tendency is to not want to say anything about it or ask them clarifying questions like, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of killing yourself? People don't want to do that because they're afraid if they say it, they're giving that person an idea that they didn't already have. And that is not the case. What research has found is that actually having a conversation with somebody about dark thoughts such as this and allowing them to say it out loud reduces the chance that they would hurt themselves. Now, I'm not saying you should be a psychologist, but I'm saying if somebody is expressing this to you, don't be afraid to engage in that conversation and then encourage them to get some professional help so that they can keep themselves safe. That will be really important. And you might be the one who can help them take that next step to actually get professional help. So if you hear that, not saying you have to go further in the conversation, but it is a cue. Hey, let's help connect this person with a resource, a hospital or a psychologist or somebody who has some expertise in mental health who can help them through this time that they're having. If people start seeming checked out, unable to focus for long periods of time. Now, little bits of that is very normal when you're under stress, but if it's just like constantly you're seeing a glazed over expression, somebody might need some more serious help. As I said in the very beginning, when we avoid reminders of the trauma, that's actually going to likely make the emotional experience worse in the long term. So if you come across somebody or you notice yourself avoiding every reminder of the storm, well, I don't want to, it's raining, so I'm not leaving the house, whatever it is. If people are disrupting their life to avoid reminders of the storm, that is a sign that they might need some more professional help. Certainly if people stop eating or sleeping, or if they don't seem able to care for themselves, or if they have children, they're not caring for their children. Those are big red flags that we need to get this person some professional help. Those were all the predetermined slides that I had, but I'm happy to take any additional questions that people have.
Karen, thanks for that. Just a quick question about the effect that, if you can expand on it a bit more for me, the effect that somebody who has a mental health challenge, the effect that it has on the family, their loved ones, because I know of situations. I mean, a friend of mine has a daughter who is autistic but not high functioning. So, and he was the one telling me, and he said it was sometime afterwards when his boss at work told him, look, who's also his friend, said, you need to take some time off. That's when he realized that his daughter's condition was actually making him depressed. And I've seen other instances where just the presence of someone with a challenge, and it doesn't have to be the breadwinner, it could be a child, creates this stress on an entire family unit. So I don't know if you can speak a little to that and how people cope with that or how people address that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, with the family unit, when one person is really struggling, it does impact everybody else. All the dynamics shift, and different people have to pick up different responsibilities. And, especially if it's one of the main caretakers in the family, if they're struggling, then the people that they were used to taking care of all of a sudden feel like they've got to take care of the other person now, which is part of the dynamics of a family. But when it is very serious or it lasts for a long time, it can be detrimental to everybody's mental health, like you said. And I do think that you bring up a good point that it's often in an unconscious way. I think people don't often realize that the impact of their loved one's mental health is having on them. But it is real. It's good to know that that's a possibility. And as we were saying before, acknowledge that that's happening. And then I think the other really important piece is if you are in a family and one of your loved ones is struggling, it is not your job to take that struggle away. I think that we often put responsibility on ourselves to make our loved ones feel better. And it's great when we can do that. But when we take it on as our responsibility, that's when it can really impact our own mental health, because really we have no control over their emotions. So when we start feeling like we can make mom feel better, or we can make, sister feel better, and then sister doesn't feel better, we think it's our fault, which is not. So I think the things to remember are, recognize that it can impact other people. Keep in mind those points that I made earlier about if it's serious, maybe encouraging them to get some help. And then make sure you don't feel it's your responsibility to change their emotional response. You can certainly be there with them. You can validate and do all those things. But if they don't start feeling better, it's not your fault and it's not your responsibility. Bernadette?
Great, thank you. I wanted to ask a question around the difference between dealing with the adults and the children in this situation. Kids don't necessarily express themselves well, or don't even know necessarily what's happening to them. How can we be more mindful of the impact of Melissa on the children?
Great question. Yeah, you're right. Kids don't always have the words to express what they're experiencing or know what they're experiencing. The ways, especially for younger kids, the ways to give them opportunities to let you know how they're feeling are often through drawing or art. If you ask a child to draw what they're feeling or experiencing, you will be surprised by what you get. They're good at putting it in pictures for the most part. And you might notice that if a child is really struggling, their picture doesn't have a lot of color or doesn't have a lot of detail, or has lots of, clouds in it or something to that effect with no sunshine. And you can kind of then, once you do that, you open the door to having a conversation about, well, tell me about your picture and tell me about what it's representing. The other thing that often is helpful, well, there's two more things I'll say that are helpful with kids to get them to talk. One is if you play with them. So sitting down and doing an activity breaks down barriers and makes it easier to talk. And that goes true for teenagers as well as for small children. If we break down those walls, they will talk a little bit more. And I forgot the other one that I was going to say. I may remember it later, but did you have another comment?
No, that's fine. Thank you. Sometimes we just don't pay sufficient attention to you know, both elderly and the kids. So, you know, it's something for us to be mindful of, that, you know, that they are being impacted. And so I've seen a lot of some of the relief that it's now around toys or activities with the children. I mean, I certainly know. I was in Florida last week, and a group of my friends, they're organizing to come in December and January to spend some time with some basic schools doing creative stuff, just like the things you spoke about, artwork, not schoolwork, artwork and things that, you know, are relaxing and so on. So there, you know, there is some attention, but I don't think sufficient. Rightfully, I understand people are focused around basic things like food and shelter and utilities and so on, but water and so on. But it really, to me, just concerning how we're managing our kids during this whole trauma. Because they have been traumatized. I mean, as adults, we can process it a little more. But imagine that kind of trauma on, you know, young kids. I just don't think we're paying sufficient attention to it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and a lot of most children probably have been traumatized, so the other thing I was going to say I remembered is part of validating to the kids that it's okay if you're struggling and you don't know why. It's okay if you're having a difficult time and you don't know how to talk about it. Let them know that that's okay, and then also leave space for if they're not feeling traumatized by it, because sometimes in situations like this, the kids look at the parents and they think, oh, I'm supposed to be traumatized by this. And so they kind of like feel like they should feel a certain way, and they might not actually. So letting them know it's okay if you don't, because there may be some that, especially some that weren't as directly impacted, but the parents are feeling it because they have friends and family or whatever. If the kids aren't feeling it, that's okay too. And just helping the kids to understand that whatever they're feeling is okay. If they want to talk about it, if they want to draw about it, if they want to journal about it, all of those are good and healthy ways to explore those emotions.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. One more question from me. I'm glad Bernie asked that question because I was gonna ask it. But along with this one, in the badly affected areas, some schools are being reopened, where for high schools and those older kids. And so it brings me to the issue of some of the responders who had to be at the forefront of trying to rescue people, police officers, healthcare people, and all of that, while they themselves suffered the damage to home and their family being exposed and so on. And teachers are also going to be in that now to actually go back to your job uh, with all of this trauma that you carried for yourself, but also have to then turn up and try to help others. So, how would you suggest people who find themselves in that situation, what can they do for themselves and what can we do to help them?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think the biggest thing that can be done for anyone in that situation is to give them this, to not deny what they're going through, to absolutely acknowledge the difficulty of the situation that they're in, and encourage them to acknowledge that with the kids in the classroom, like saying out loud the thing that everybody's thinking. We know that it's difficult to be here when we're still having trouble at home. And it's even difficult for me as your teacher to be here. And we can, this is a safe place to talk about that. I would also caution, the teachers to, and they probably are aware of this, but to remind them and that the children who have been traumatized, who are going back to school, are not going to be functioning at the same cognitive level that they're used to, very likely, because stress makes it harder to think clearly. So this is not to say that they are not going to get back to that point, but it's going to be a challenge for a lot of students to get their brain back in the place, and for a lot of teachers to get their brain back in the place where they're able to function in that job the way that they normally do, or in their role as a student the way they normally do. And so just being aware that that is a struggle that a lot of people are going to have, and acknowledging that, and not trying to pretend that that doesn't exist, I think is probably one of the things that you can do to help. You know, as far as day to day, if there are other people in the community, you know, that can say to the teachers, hey, while you're gone, we can help at your home in this way, in the things that you were doing. You know, if the community can try to come together in some of those ways, that can be beneficial. But it's going to be an adjustment for everybody. And I think the expectations need to take into account what everybody's dealing with.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I'm aware that we have police officers, justices of the peace. So, you know, we've spoken about the kids, we've spoken about the teachers. Is there anything special or different? You know, I'm just appealing for them with regards to what they should do, because I'm just a regular citizen, so I'm not going to see a lot of the things they're going to see. So we always assume the police officers, the JPs, are superhuman. What would you say to you know, these persons who we assume are superhuman coping with this? So some of them are on here, but I'm just saying, I'm speaking and asking, how do you, so for example, Novlet, she's a big expert. If, you know, what would I tell Novlet? Because I assume she knows everything.
Well,
I
I think that's a good point. What I would tell somebody is the same thing that I started with in the beginning, that your reactions are normal. Just because you're in a field that, you know, you're quote unquote prepared to handle different situations. Nobody has ever seen a storm of this magnitude in this country before. It has never been recorded in this, you know, this is a historic experience for everybody, and that includes first responders. And so it is okay for them to have, and appropriate for them to have, an emotional response to it. That doesn't make them less good at their job. It doesn't mean anything negative about them. And I know, at least in the US, I don't know if it's the same in Jamaica, that there's a culture in policing, for example, where, you know, we're tough and we don't get bogged down by things. And that, I think, challenging that expectation is a good thing in times like this. Just, you know, it's okay. It's okay for you to have a reaction and to be human and to feel something when you're encountering this at a very large scale. That is just part of being human. It's okay. And talk to people about it. And if you don't feel you can talk to people about it, again, you can journal, you can talk to a professional, you can, you know, try the other strategies that we talked about. But basically validating it, reminding them that they're human and that's a human response, and it's okay if they're experiencing that. There's probably a lot of people who are experiencing it and not saying anything. So if you look around and everybody looks like they're doing okay, that might not actually be the case. There's probably a lot of people struggling. So I would just remind them of their humanness, and know that, hey, you've got a safe space in me if you need to talk.
Excellent. Thank you. They're all quiet, Karen. Anybody else have questions? We have Rotarians on here from other clubs, other spaces. So, you know, I know one of them went down to Westmoreland with the Rotaractors. So I'm just putting it out. If people have questions, don't be shy.
I would have a question. It's based on, I know that I was one of the person that went down to Westmoreland for sure, and it was the devastation is real. It wasn't my first visit because I've been to where um it was Spring Gardens in St. James as well. And it was a devastation there. Even us as volunteers can also have mental breakdown when just seeing the sight of what's going on. I just wanted to know how would we go about, structuring those devastation with each other to show that we can show strength in these times so that we can also be there for others in need.
Mm-hmm.
And Karen, that is the president of the Rotary Club of Portmore. He was an interactor, rotaractor, now he's a president. So he's a longtime Rotarian with lots of experience. So just framing it in terms of, a longtime volunteer that has seen a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a hard question because I think if I understood your question is how can we show strength to help others that are in a more difficult situation? I think that and I sound a bit like a broken record, but I think often the most powerful thing we can do is to give space to people who need it. And so if I can be there without judgment for somebody who's going through something, then they can lean on me and take some strength from me. And strength doesn't always mean not being emotional. Sometimes people find a lot of strength in emotional vulnerability. And if that means that you're crying with them, that's okay. If it means that you're sitting and letting them cry, that's okay. I think the fact that people continue to show up for whatever the needs are, and we as Rotarians are saying we want to help, what can we do? I think that's showing our strength and letting them know that we're going to get through this together.
Yes, thanks. And but to follow that, not just only I wasn't speaking only for the persons who is less fortunate, but even also the volunteers, because sometimes they also break down,
Yes.
even them just going there, they break down and probably don't want to see the site, don't want to even go back because of what they've seen, what occurs. It can also be a mental breakdown for us as volunteers as well.
Absolutely. And I think the same thing applies. You validate and say, yes, that was a traumatic thing that you saw and you were going there to try to help, and it feels overwhelming, and it feels like, how can one person or a group of people make a difference? And just having those conversations and giving space for it to feel hard and insurmountable even, I think that does a lot for people to understand that, okay, I'm not alone in this feeling. And then you can offer, but we're going to keep doing what we can. We're going to take a little bit at a time until we can, help. We're all working together to try to help. And so reminding people who are the volunteers that what you're doing is making a difference, even if it's a little bit at a time. I think that can be helpful, and then giving them space to experience how hard it is to volunteer in a situation like this.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Prezi, are you there? Prezi?
I am here.
Okay.
I was waiting for the cue that the conversation is now over. Anyone else wants to ask one last question, make one last comment, observation? Okay, if there isn't any, then it is now my turn to ask our past President Noblet to give the vote of thanks.
Okay, thanks, Prezi. I think this was a very productive meeting for everyone who has joined us, and we thank you for your presence and your interest in being with us to hear this very, very needed conversation with Karen, who I told when we first spoke that she's a parishioner since she has a connection to Westmoreland, which is my parish. And so, yes, we are linked that way. But this approach to the discussion around the mental health challenges that people, Jamaica faces, where Melissa is concerned, and how we help those who are directly or indirectly impacted. I think we covered it well, and the observations and question asked, I think, also brought home the fact, to me at least, that not the way the thing was framed, we can use what we were exposed to today for any form of challenges, right? Up to trauma, given that we are the non-professionals. We can use it in our own personal experiences or family experiences. We have, I hope, taken away things that we can use with our children, with our friends, and especially those of us who interact more with those persons who are still out there facing the challenge and basically have to get up each day and make a decision as to how they go about their day. Because while what they're feeling is normal, the days that they now experience are not the normal days they're used to. So it's a whole new way of being, and comes with all kinds of stressors. So it is up to us, I believe, to create safe spaces as much as we can for people to seek our support or be willing to ask for our support, those of us who are interacting. And also, based on some of the things that was said earlier, we also have to manage our survivor's guilt too in our own, because I have family who are directly impacted in St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland. And I there was a load on my shoulder until I heard that they were alive. So, but when that kind of load shifted, there is still another one. The ongoing concern for everyday coping with just the basic things. Um, and we all take Christmas for a big deal in Jamaica, and it's right on us, right? So I think this presentation will help all of us, especially thinking about having a great Christmas while your fellow Jamaicans are elsewhere still struggling without basic amenities and uncertain supplies of food and whatnot. So it is up to each of us to use what we got from you the best way we know how for our own situation and to be able to help others. So I want to thank you very much for your care and concern for Jamaica and your willingness to be here to share of your considerable experience in this field of dealing with people who are experiencing trauma and how they cope with it. And it's much appreciated. And I agree with you that it's not too early to start talking about the struggles, because it is precisely how we cope with the struggles of the trauma that will help us in the recovery or not. So both the physical need and the emotional and mental need go hand in hand. And we have to find a way as a country to marry both. It's body, mind, and spirit, no matter where you take it. So it is not too early. And hopefully we will find another occasion to invite you back in the new year, because this experience is not an event. It is a process. It's not a sprint, even though we're a sprinting nation. Now we have to learn a marathon. And that is a step change in mindset and behavior. So I can only, on behalf of the Rotary Club of Manor Park and the Rotarians who are on the call and our guests who took our invitation to join us, to tell you our heartfelt thanks and gratitude for you sharing with us. Thank you very much, Karen.